Hey, I'm Eddie Joe. I'm an intensivist, and I'm making a video today about how I deal with death. And my pharmacist actually told me to do this video in two forms, kind of how I speak to families and how I engage people regarding death, as well as how I manage it myself from a psychological perspective. It's kind of a touchy subject, and it's a very difficult video to make. I really hope that you take something out of it because it took me quite a while to write this video, and I struggled quite a bit while doing it. So I really hope it's something of value to you. And if it is something that's of value to you, please leave a like, leave your personal comments down below. I do seem to interact with most of you who write positive or at least constructive comments on my videos. So yeah, feel free to go ahead and do so. Again, if you get something out of it, like and subscribe, share this with your friends, leave your comments. I'm trying to get better at this every day. You could also follow along on my journey of being a better critical care doctor on Instagram and Twitter. The links are all around, whatever. And I do like to stress that I do make mistakes every single day. I'm not perfect, and first and foremost, I'm a human being trying to do the best I can at every facet of life. Dealing with death is one of those things that I'm working on constantly. You know, part of being a critical care doctor is the fact that people die every single day, just about, in the ICU. It's my job to deal with death. It's my job to not allow people to die. But despite my best intentions and the intentions of my team, people do die routinely in the ICU. It's really a privilege for me to be in a place where I get to try to help in that process. And the reason why I say that is because patients and their families trust me and my staff every single day to save their lives. That's a huge, huge privilege and a huge responsibility. And if you aren't capable of accepting that and capable of appreciating that, I really don't think that the critical care specialty is right for you. Every single day, you need to know the weight of that privilege. That's just the way it is. My decisions ultimately decide the life and death of patients. So every single decision I make, I need to know, and anybody who wants to be in this field needs to know, what's the weight of that decision and how that decision could affect the patient's life. Now, as I said, despite my decisions, patients still may die. And it doesn't mean that I'm a bad doctor, okay? If I try my best, circumstances are what they are, people still are going to die. And that's something that you really, really need to have basically ingrained in your mind when you start this whole journey. The whole concept that you want to get old and you want your family members to get old and pass away in their sleep, that's not something that, at least I could say, that's happening more often. I think that's happening less often. I have no data to support that. As many of you follow me on Instagram, you notice that I'm big on data. But everybody notices that grandma, grandpa, whoever in their family is getting sicker and sicker and sicker, and then they just get brought into the hospital, and ultimately their last days are usually hanging out with me in an ICU. And that's just the way it is. When a patient comes in who is very, very sick, as is a criteria to be in the ICU, I mean, you're not in the ICU if you're healthy. The first thing I like to stress with families as well as patients, if they're able to interact with me, is exactly how sick they are. A lot of that is a judgment call. It's not based on actual data. It's not like we calculate Apache scores, in our minds. Apache scores are more than anything for research purposes. But I really tell the family how sick they are. I don't give them percentages, because the truth is I don't know. I mean, I don't think anybody knows what the real percentages are, because obviously data is based on, I guess you could say, a curve scale or so. But I think it's important for them to know that there is a chance that the patient may die from the illness that has brought them into the intensive care unit. Making everything seem rosy all the time is not necessarily fair, because a lot of times the rug is pulled out from underneath the patient and underneath from us, and bad things happen really, really fast. And that's something that I stress a lot to families, especially when they get into the ICU. It's usually something, boom, fast that happened. It's not something that, well, a lot of times a chronic illness could take you down, but what's going to actually push you over the edge is something fast. And I always stress that Bad things happen fast, good things happen slowly. And with regards to them actually getting better in the ICU, I stress that that's something that's going to take a while to happen, to not expect that from 1 hour to the next. And just going around reading my notes that I have here, a lot of times we ask people for a living will, and living wills are notoriously, how could I say, they're notoriously vague. And the reason why I say that is because the wording in it is meant to be vague. A living will usually doesn't specify much with regards to what actually the patient wants to have done, unless the family expressly knows what the patient wanted to have done before. And if a patient is unable to make their own decisions as to what type of aggressive measures they want, whether they want to have all the crazy things we do in the ICU, be it intubation, central lines, pressors, artificial life support, etc., or whether they would prefer a more comfort measure type of approach, that's something that you need the patient's family to weigh in on, because they are the ones who know what the patient's wishes would be. I make my recommendations, but ultimately the family is the one who decides. It takes a lot of emotional intelligence, and a lot of times that in the eyes of the family determines a good doctor versus a bad doctor. You could be the best doctor in the world, but if you can't communicate with the family, if you cannot read that family, if you cannot interact with that family in a compassionate way, you are nobody. You are a bad doctor. You may know all the data, but if you are a very stoic, very stone-faced person, the family is not going to be as positively receptive to you as to somebody who puts themselves in the shoes of that family, in the shoes of that patient, and is able to relate and understand and sympathize with the situation that's going on. Is that a huge emotional drain as a physician? Yes, absolutely. It's a huge drain on me as well as my staff emotionally, but the truth is that that's what needs to be done in order to decide what's best for your patient. That's a little bit of how I deal with it with the families. I don't want to get into too many specifics because, every situation is so different. Every single interaction with families and with the patients, every chronic illness versus acute illness, every acute decompensation is so different that it's really hard to kind of template that out and standardize it. The reason why I think a lot of you came to this video is to see how I personally deal with one of my patients dying. If you take a look at it, even if, statistically speaking, let's say septic shock patients, the mortality is about 25%. I know different institutions have different numbers, but just going off of the data of like the process and ARISE trials, let's just call it ballpark 25%. That means 1/4 of my patients who come in with septic shock are going to die on me. 1 in 4 patients, septic shock, are going to die, despite the best I could possibly do for them. But how do I deal with it? Well, it's hard, as you see. I struggle with it all the time. If I do everything I possibly could do, if I provide the patient with the best evidence-based treatments, the best antibiotics, the best metabolic resuscitation, the best fluid administration, the best ventilator titration, the best pressor dosing, the best I could possibly do for the patient, and despite our best efforts, they die, that's hard to deal with, but at least I know that I did my best. The times where I struggle with people dying are those times where we have those what if moments, or the times that we don't really know why the patient just died on us. And that makes it extremely hard because a lot of times we don't know exactly why the patient dies. I wouldn't say a lot of the times. I'd say a small percentage of the time we don't know why a patient exactly dies, but those times are possibly the hardest where we don't have it figured out. I want the best possible outcome for my patient, but this is where we take into account what the family would have wanted. A lot of times the family is the one who withdraws care once I basically state that with all the evidence and all the data, all the labs, I state to the family that the outcome's not going to be good, and the patient's quality of life is going to be quite bad should they survive this insult. A lot of times the family would be the ones who would say, let's transition from all this aggressive care towards comfort measures. The times where it's extremely, extremely difficult though, and I hope that this doesn't get me into trouble because I'm just laying it out there, are the cases of families who they don't want to let go, despite everything just showing that the patient's not going to do well. And that goes in particular with these patients who have underlying metastatic cancers who are untreatable. And then they have one little event, and when I say little, I mean big, like a pneumonia or a urinary tract infection, and they go into septic shock or any other type of shock for that matter. And the family just doesn't want to let go because, quote, they're fighters. And this whole idea of they're fighters, I mean, we're all fighters, really. But we all have our day where we're going to die. And that day when it comes, do we want to basically die with being in my hands with me doing chest compressions on you and, shocking the heart? Especially, I don't have the data for this right now, but there is all this new information that we're getting so good at doing CPR right now that we are actually perfusing the brain better during compressions. And I've had, I guess, the misfortune of having patients who wake up while I'm doing chest compressions on them, and that's something that's a little bit difficult. Actually, it's very difficult to be pushing on somebody's chest and having them look at you and try to grab you. And the moment that you stop doing chest compressions because you think you've achieved the ROSC, all of a sudden they are flaccid and unconscious again because they're not perfusing the brain. If that's something that a person would necessarily want to be their last moments on the face of this earth, is tough. It's really tough. And if there's no way that we could get that person, that patient out of the hole, no way that we could save their lives, it's tough. I don't know if I'm gonna edit that part out. I think my face says it all, that there are challenges to this job. And a lot of times those particular situations where families don't want to let go it's a huge part of burnout, and a whole part of, the times that I feel the most emotionally drained are those particular moments where you know that the patient's not going to do well and you're just keeping them alive artificially with no chance of hope whatsoever. I know miracles do happen. I know that there are going to be some people who dislike this video based on what I'm saying, but it's the truth. It's the truth. Let me see if I have anything else here on my notes. So, all in all, this job is, being an intensivist is an amazing job. I love my job. I come home satisfied with my career, knowing that I'm doing something good for people, knowing that I tried my best, knowing that I gave patients the best possible care that I could. I really hope that this video doesn't come back to hurt me, because I may have, when I was rambling, said something inappropriately. If I did and I offended somebody, I apologize in advance. I can't save everybody. Even though I try to, I cannot save everybody. That's something you have to be accepting and know, because if you think you could save everybody, you're going to be gravely disappointed and you're going to end up in very bad shape from a psychological perspective and an emotional perspective. And I don't want that on any of you, whether you're a nurse practitioner, a PA, a medical student who's looking forward to becoming a doctor and, cowboy, come in, save the day. Even though we do a lot of that, don't get me wrong, but I don't want you to look at this career and contemplate coming into it not knowing everything that you're going to get yourself into, because that would be bad. Again, as I look through my last note, this job of being a critical care doctor, of being an intensivist, is a huge privilege. I cannot stress enough how satisfied I am with my career, but I am very well aware of everything that comes with it and the responsibility that comes with it. And I think I've said this a bunch of times. I love my job, and I wish you all the same, sentiment, the same emotion, the same passion that I have towards my career and my job. I wish it all to you, the viewers, that you all find in your life what you want and what you need out of your career, because it's not a job for me, really. It's just cool. And I leave it off on that note. I hope you gained something from this video, and yeah, subscribe, like, all that fun stuff. Have a great day. Bye.